I want you to try a quick mental exercise for me. I want you to cast your mind back to the year 2012.
Oh, wow, 2012. That feels like ancient history in tech years.
It really does. I mean, we're talking about a time when Zoom wasn't a household name. It definitely wasn't a verb. It was just a sound a fast car made.
Right, yeah. If you wanted a video chat back then, you're probably wrestling with Skype,
Exactly.
dealing with a totally pixelated, lagging connection that just dropped every 4 minutes.
It was the absolute era of, can you hear me now? And just freezing mid-sentence with some horrible facial expression.
I remember it vividly.
Now, in that very specific kind of clunky technological environment, I want you to imagine trying to teach someone how to execute a perfect julienne cut on a carrot, but remotely.
That sounds like a disaster waiting to happen.
Right. There's no 4K streaming. There are no ring lights. It's just grit and these really grainy webcams.
Or at least a recipe for some very badly cut fingers, I'd say.
And yet, that is exactly when our subject for today decided to launch an entire industry. So for this deep dive, we are looking at the sources and the story of Chef Angela Michel.
The founder of Culinary Kisses.
Yes, Culinary Kisses. And she is currently celebrating 14 years in business.
What's wild is she claims the title of the world's first virtual chef.
Which is a massive claim. But, looking at the source material we have today, the timeline actually holds up.
It really does.
She launched in February 2012. And I think the key distinction here and why this deep dive is so fascinating is that she didn't pivot to virtual cooking because of a pandemic.
No, not at all.
She was doing this nearly a decade before COVID forced the rest of the world to just catch up.
That's the hook for me, honestly, because we all lived through that scramble in 2020.
Oh, yeah.
We saw Michelin star restaurants panicking, trying to figure out how to unmute themselves on Teams. But Chef Angela Michel was already sitting on an 8-year head start.
She had already built the roadmap while everyone else was still buying webcams. So our mission today is to reverse engineer that roadmap. We've got her retrospective case studies and her business philosophy here.
And we really need to figure out the logistics of how you build a sensory experience, like cooking through a medium that completely strips away smell and taste.
Exactly. And we also need to talk about her framework, the 5 C's, which kind of explains why this business model survived when so many others failed.
It's totally a study in resilience, but also, surprisingly, in user interface design.
Yeah, let's get into the origin story. It's 2012, and she launches with a vision called Cooking Without Borders.
Great name.
It is a great slogan on paper. It implies using technology to connect people through food, regardless of where they live, but practically. Have to be honest, looking at the early days, I was highly skeptical.
Skeptical how?
Well, think about it. If I'm paying for a cooking class, a huge part of the value proposition is the sensory feedback.
Right, having the expert in the room.
Yeah. I want the chef to taste my sauce and tell me, oh, this needs more salt. Or I want them to smell if I'm burning the garlic.
Which happens easily.
Exactly. So how do you justify removing the 2 most important senses, taste and smell, from a cooking class and still charge actual money for it?
That was the fundamental hurdle. And the sources are really honest about this struggle. The goal wasn't to replicate the in-person experience perfectly.
Okay.
It was to create a new kind of accessibility. She recognized that for a lot of people, maybe they have social anxiety, maybe they're immunocompromised, or maybe they just live in a food desert. A physical cooking class was just never an option.
So initially, it's really an access play.
Primarily, yes. But you brought up the sensory deprivation issue. Cooking without borders implies you can transfer the knowledge anywhere.
Right.
To do that without taste or smell, she had to fundamentally change the pedagogy, the way she actually taught.
How so? Because you can't just yell taste it at a laptop screen.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
She calls it translating the sensory. In a normal kitchen, a chef might say, cook this until it smells done.
Which is super vague.
Totally vague. And in a virtual class, that instruction is useless because the chef can't smell the student's kitchen.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So she had to refine her verbal cues to rely entirely on sight and sound. Those are the only 2 senses the laptop transmits.
Give me an example of that. Like, what does that sound like in a class?
So instead of saying, cook until fragrant, the instruction becomes, saute the garlic until the color shifts to a pale gold, and the sizzling sound changes from a high-pitched hiss to a lower crackle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she has to describe the indicators of the smell rather than the smell itself.
That is fascinating. It actually forces the student to become the primary taster.
Precisely. And that inadvertently teaches the student better cooking intuition.
Because they have to pay closer attention.
Exactly. Instead of relying on the chef to swoop in and fix the seasoning, the student has to learn those sensory cues themselves. It creates a far more independent cook.
That's incredibly smart. But I do want to talk about the hardware for a second. Because again, we are back in 2012.
The dark ages of streaming.
Literally. I remember trying to stream Netflix in 2012, and it was just a buffer fest. How is she streaming live video of a stove that is high quality enough to see a pale gold color shift?
With a massive amount of difficulty. The source material highlights that there was no best practice for this.
She couldn't just Google it.
No, she couldn't just search how to set up a virtual cooking studio on YouTube because nobody had done it yet. She basically had to be an engineer.
Right, just think about camera angles. If you're on a laptop, the webcam is usually just looking right up your nose.
Not very appetizing.
No. And that's useless for cooking, unless you're, cooking with your chin.
Right. You really need a bird's eye view of the cutting board and the pan.
But how do you rig an overhead camera in a standard home kitchen without professional lighting trusses?
In a home kitchen, yeah.
She had to figure out mounting systems, tripods, and lighting that wouldn't get completely fogged up by steam.
Oh, steam must be a total nightmare for a camera lens.
It is. And she had to do this while ensuring the upload speed was sufficient.
Which was terrible back then. That's a key technical distinction the sources make. Most home internet packages have decent download speeds so you can watch movies, but terrible upload speeds.
And since she's the one broadcasting, she desperately needs the upload.
Right. She was fighting the infrastructure of the internet itself to ensure that when she showed a delicate technique, it didn't just turn into a blocky, pixelated mess on the student's end.
So we've got the cameras rigged, we've got the verbal cues down, now we have to deal with the logistics of the food itself.
This is the hard part.
This is the part of the business model that usually kills meal kit companies. Supply chain.
It is absolutely the silent killer. Think about it. If you're teaching a class on distinct Thai flavors, you need your student in rural Ohio to have galangal and kaffir lime leaves.
Which they probably don't have at the local corner store.
Right. And if they use standard ginger and lime zest, it's just not the same dish.
So does she ship the ingredients directly to them?
It was a hybrid model.
Yeah.
But the shipping logistics were a nightmare she had to solve very early on.
I can imagine. Perishables are tough.
Very tough. You need insulation, you need ice packs, you need to calculate shipping zones so the fresh cilantro doesn't arrive as a brown sludge 3 days later.
And you have to do all of this cost effectively, because if the shipping costs more than the class itself, you have no business.
Correct. So she had to curate recipes that were highly shippable or rely on ingredients that were accessible enough for the student to source locally with a very specific, detailed shopping list.
That adds a whole layer of complexity to the curriculum design.
A layer a normal restaurant chef never even has to think about.
It sounds totally exhausting. And on top of all the logistics, she has to actually sell this concept to people. The skepticism in 2012 must have been off the charts.
It really was. The phrase virtual experience back then usually just meant a video game.
Right, like playing The Sims or something.
Exactly. The source notes that she spent a massive amount of time just educating the market. Corporate clients, specifically, looked at online learning as the cheap alternative. It was seen as lesser than an in-person event.
Oh, I get that. It was probably viewed as, well, we can't afford a real offsite for the team, so we'll just do this little webinar thing.
That was exactly the stigma. She had to convince them that this wasn't just watching a pre-recorded YouTube video together. It had to be live and interactive. And that brings us to the trust factor.
Trust. How so?
You are inviting a stranger into your home, digitally. But also, you are trusting them that the end result will be edible.
Good point.
If the stream cuts out while I'm making caramel, which is basically molten lava, I might burn my entire kitchen down.
Or at least ruin a good pot.
Right. So she had to build systems, backup connections, very clear printed instructions alongside the video, all to ensure safety and success.
She basically had to create a fail-safe protocol for home cooking.
She did. And she integrated storytelling into it, which is brilliant.
Tell me more about that.
She realized that if the tech glitched or if the video was a little bit grainy, the narrative would hold the class together.
That's a clever workaround.
She wasn't just saying chop the onion. She was telling the history of the dish, the cultural background. That kept people engaged even when the buffering wheel was spinning.
So she spends 8 years just grinding. She's refining the camera angles, the lighting, the supply chain, the storytelling.
Really building the foundation.
She is building this infrastructure in the dark, basically.
And then the lights suddenly turn on.
March 2020, the world completely shuts down.
This is the pivotal moment in the case study.
Hmm.
For the entire hospitality industry, this was an extinction-level event.
Absolutely.
Restaurants closed, in-person cooking schools went dark, everyone was scrambling to figure out how to monetize their skills online overnight.
I remember seeing these famous celebrity chefs on Instagram Live just holding their phones with one hand and trying to furiously whisk a sauce with the other. It was chaotic.
It was completely amateur hour, but for Chef Angela Michelle, it was just Tuesday.
She didn't have to pivot at all.
She didn't have to change a single thing. While her competitors were desperately trying to figure out which ring light to buy on Amazon, she was already scaling.
Wow.
The source notes that her business didn't just survive during the pandemic, it exploded. Because she was the only one who actually looked professional from day one.
That is the ultimate validation of being an early adopter. You look crazy for 8 years, and then suddenly you look like a total genius.
Exactly. And it allowed her to capture the corporate market immediately.
Because companies were desperate at that point.
They really were. They had all these remote employees feeling isolated in their apartments. They needed team building that wasn't just a virtual happy hour where everyone stares awkwardly at a grid of faces.
Oh, the dreaded Zoom happy hour. Honestly, the worst invention of the pandemic.
It was terrible. Nobody knew when to talk. But cooking gives you something to do with your hands.
It fills the awkward silence.
Exactly. And because she had the logistics already worked out, she could deploy these events globally. She went from convincing people it was possible to being the definitive go-to expert for how it's done.
But I want to push back on something here, looking at the sources.
Okay, sure.
We've talked a lot about the tech and the business model, but if this was just about efficient instruction, people could just watch a masterclass or a high-end YouTube video.
Sure.
Why are they paying for the live interaction? There has to be something deeper keeping people there beyond just a perfectly angled overhead camera.
This brings us to her core philosophy. She calls it the 5 C's. It's the entire framework for why her specific model works so well.
Let's run through them.
All right. They are connection, confidence, curiosity, culture, and community.
Connection and community seem pretty standard for any social business, but confidence really stands out to me. How does a virtual class build confidence better than a real in-person one?
It's counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, because in a real class, the expert chef is right there to save you if you mess up.
But that is exactly the point. In a real class, the chef saves you.
Oh, I see.
You are in a sterile, professional kitchen. You have perfectly sharp knives, prep bowls ready, and maybe even a sous chef who cleans up your mess. It is a total fantasy environment.
True. And then you go back home and realize you don't have a salamander broiler, your knives are completely dull, and your cutting board is tiny.
Exactly. When you learn virtually, you are standing in your own kitchen.
Yeah.
You are wrestling with your own everyday equipment.
You're using that one stove burner that always gets way too hot.
You are battling your own environment. And when you succeed under those conditions, you know you did it.
That's powerful.
You didn't do it because of the fancy equipment. You did it despite your limitations. Chef Angela Michelle realized that environmental competence learning in the actual space where you live creates a much stickier type of confidence.
That is a really profound insight. I honestly hadn't thought about the psychology of that home court advantage before.
It completely shifts the power dynamic from the teacher to the student. And then there's the culture piece. This goes right back to her initial mission of cooking without borders.
Is this just about, cooking different global cuisines?
It's a bit deeper than that. Food is a vehicle for culture, obviously. But virtual teaching allows for a specific kind of cultural exchange that is incredibly hard to do locally.
Give me an example.
She talks in the sources about bringing a highly specific cultural experience, say authentic Creole, cooking directly into a living room in a suburb in Germany or Japan.
It completely breaks down the geographical gatekeeping of food.
Right. And the rewards she lists in her case studies aren't just financial metrics or subscriber counts.
What are they?
She talks about the feeling of hearing remote corporate teams just naturally laughing together. She mentions families spread across 3 different time zones cooking the exact same meal simultaneously.
And that covers the community piece of the 5 Cs.
Exactly. Imagine a family that can't be together for the holidays. They can all log in, cook the same menu under her guidance, and then literally sit down to eat together on screen.
She is actively using the technology to repair the isolation that modern life and often technology itself creates.
It's highly ironic, isn't it?
It is. We usually blame screens for separating us. We're always saying, put down your phone at the dinner table. But here, the screen literally is the table.
It is the ultimate facilitator. She argues that food is a universal language, and virtual teaching allows that language to travel further than it ever could in a physical classroom.
It's not a substitute for the real thing at all.
No, it's an expansion of it.
So we're looking at 14 years in the game. Most tech startups don't even last 14 months.
That's a fact.
She's survived the heavy skepticism phase, the grueling startup phase, and the massive pandemic boom phase. What is next for Culinary Kisses? Is she moving into the metaverse? Are we going to be chopping digital onions in VR headsets?
Well, the sources don't explicitly mention VR headsets yet, though knowing her track record, I wouldn't put it past her.
True.
But the main focus right now is on deepening that corporate and educational integration. She sees a massive future in actively supporting the remote work culture.
Which makes a lot of sense. Remote work seems like it's definitely here to stay, at least in some hybrid form.
And companies are starving for genuine culture. She is positioning Culinary Kisses not just as a fun cooking school, but as a crucial culture-building platform for distributed teams.
That's a smart pivot. Or evolution, I should say.
She's also planning new books and digital resources to capture that entire 5Cs philosophy in print.
But the core belief remains the same, right? That virtual cooking is truly transformative.
That is absolutely her hill to die on. She believes this industry is actually still in its infancy.
Really? Even after 14 years?
Yes. Because as the tech gets better, think about augmented reality, even better streaming quality, maybe even haptic feedback, the gap between virtual and real is going to shrink even more.
It is such a testament to just sticking with a core idea.
It really is. It proves that being first isn't just about being early to the party. It's about having the extreme resilience to wait for the rest of the world to finally catch up to you.
You know, it really changes how I look at my own laptop screen.
How so?
Well, I usually see it as a source of stress. It's full of unanswered emails and pending deadlines, stressful news alerts.
Oh, definitely.
But for Chef Angela Michelle, that screen was literally a doorway into someone else's home.
It was a way to break bread digitally.
Exactly. So here is the final thought I want to leave you with today as we wrap up this deep dive.
Let's hear it.
We spend a lot of time wringing our hands about the loneliness epidemic and how our digital life is so cold and impersonal.
We talk about it all the time.
Right. But we just looked at a case study where technology was used to preserve the absolute most tactile, warm human tradition of all, which is cooking and eating together.
It forced the humanity right through the fiber optic cables.
Beautifully put, yes. So my question for you is, if a virtual connection can carry the warmth, the smell, and the taste of a meal through shared imagination and careful storytelling, what other tactile human experiences are we entirely underestimating in the digital space?
That's a great question.
What else are we currently saying simply can't be done online, just because we haven't found our own Chef Angela Michelle to design the roadmap yet?
That is definitely something to chew on.
Pun absolutely intended. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll catch you on the next one.